Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 5 of the Lord Ninja Choke MMA Picks podcast. I'm Will over here in the UK, and I'm also joined by Dom in the US and Josh in Australia. Well, gents, we've had a week's break. I hope we're all feeling refreshed and ready to break down this week's card. We've got another Apex event here, and it's headlined by Erin Blanchfield versus Maycee Barber. Before we get into that one, though, I guess we'll quickly take a look at a recap of last event's results from the three of us. Starting with myself, I didn't actually manage to watch this card live, which is quite disappointing because, as you can see, I had a pretty decent event. 77% return on investment from 8.25 units staked. It's pretty good. I broke down the Jared Gordon fight on the podcast last time out. The result there wasn't quite what I was expecting, but obviously I was on the right side, which is lovely. I think Jared Gordon was good value there, despite the outcome being a lot simpler than I expected. The Lisboa bet wasn't good, but thankfully I managed to downsize that to just a single unit. I mean, I think once the news kind of like became common knowledge that she'd had like a recent knee surgery, I think I lost pretty much all confidence, but just wanted to stick with it. Denise Gomez winning inside the distance. I played it slightly differently at the time because I wanted to get in early. I was really, really keen on that. That was definitely my favorite bet of the week. I've had a good success on picking these sort of dominant prelim women who are like minus 400 on the money line to win inside the distance has been quite a nice narrative for me this year. So it's one I'm looking to target a little bit more. Hyunsung Park, that was a really nice one as well. I think the money line was going the other way pretty much all week. Carlos Hernandez seemed like a very popular underdog, but I just didn't understand why. And I think that's another one that we focused on the podcast. So it's nice to be going against the grain on that one. I tried parlaying a couple of method of victory props, which unfortunately Jared Gordon exceeded expectation. And then last minute I threw a unit across a couple of Yadia Del Valle spots, but thankfully he won inside the distance. I thought that line was a bit generous because Conor Matthews is atrocious. So yeah, a pretty decent card for me overall. Very happy with that. It was nice to keep it simple and not mess around too much with props, but yeah, a nice slate overall.
Yeah, I had a night I'd rather forget. So I won't spend too long dwelling on this, but I obviously didn't take good advice that I received from you guys by betting on Thiago Moises and Sadiq Youssef, and didn't take my own advice by betting on Gilbert Burns. So money lines were definitely bad for me. Made some money back through parlaying favourites, which I hate to do, but it seems that that's just the way that UFC betting is going, that you have to parlay some favourites together because the lines are very sharp these days. Yeah, so I was lucky to come back with only a minus 32% ROI because it could have been a lot worse, I think. It was a card which I wasn't very confident on, probably shouldn't have had this much outlay on it. And yeah, lesson learned, really. Yeah, and I'll hand over to Josh.
Overall, pretty good. I am mildly pissed about the Camilla one not hitting because otherwise it'd be a clean sweep. But all the locks landed. My prediction accuracy is as high as it ever has been so far. Like in all the years that I've been predicting fights, 66.3% is the highest I've hit, and that number is going to go probably down from here. Like that's the peak. As for bets, I don't really cover my bets because firstly they all suck and they don't really land. As a recommendation from from last episode, that 2-leg parlay, I think that hit, and then the Park KO did not. The Park did get a submission, so that was a bit upsetting. But overall, in terms of like my predictions, I'm happy. I'm happy. That's it.
I think you're being very modest, weren't you? Didn't you say you're number 3 on Topology in this specific week?
Yeah, number 3. I was at number 6, and I was like mildly crapping myself because I was on this Discord the whole time, just typing like crazy, spamming my images and spamming these screenshots and probably pissing off Will. But yeah, a bit modest here, but that's just me. I like to be modest.
Yeah, I think another thing to really highlight there is that you've also got a couple of like perfect picks there. Hitting those round 2 and method of victories on Santos and Gomez is pretty good.
Yeah, it's all the women pretty much, and Costa, but
I've been trying to tell you. Yeah, women's.
Yeah.
Hey, you know what? On the conversation of women's MMA, it segues us nicely to looking at this upcoming card, which is headlined by Erin Blanchfield and Maycee Barber. So, does anyone have any strong opinions or thoughts on the card as a whole before we get into the specifics?
You can go, Dom.
I think this is, yeah. I mean, we said it last week. We thought that was the worst card. This is possibly worse than last week's. It's definitely been a struggle looking up and down this card to find good spots to bet. And obviously taking my learnings from last week, I'm going to go very light this week, save a bit of bankroll into the future weeks, which are looking really exciting with 316, 317 coming up. So on this card, I was looking forward to the Goff co-fight. That was one I had circled as being a potential banger. It's got cancelled now. I'm covering Gamrot Klein later. I think that would be a great fight. Other than that, there's nothing on here that I'm particularly excited about. How about you, Josh?
Yeah, it's a pretty mediocre card, which fits the Apex perfectly, I guess. Because no one's going to really watch it. I am intrigued by a few inside the distance bets like Jacoby Lopez, Reese Todorovic, and Oki Medeiros. I reckon those three would be will result in the finish pretty much. So other than that, and the fights that we're going to cover, I could not give enough crap about anything else really.
I think the only thing that really saves this card is that when you have done a little bit of research into some fights, or if you're a hardcore fan, there are at least like some narratives throughout the card that make it interesting. For anyone who's done tape on Andreas Gustafsson making his UFC debut, he looks like a very interesting fighter, probably quite a flawed one, but I'm intrigued to see how he gets on. Trevin Giles is a more generous level of competition than Jeremiah Wells for him. Kurt Holliber versus Jordan Levitt should be interesting. I was kind of originally tempted on Kurt Holliber as a dog there, but I decided against it eventually. And I'm also excited to see Rayanne dos Santos get a very long overdue UFC win because she's the best 0-2 UFC fighter on the roster. You heard it here first. What a statement.
Yeah, great call there, She
So
sucks, though, like,
yeah, she's not that good. But anyway, there probably is someone really obvious who's 0-2 that I actually made that statement look really stupid. But anyway, we move on before I highlight that too much. So the three fights we are looking at for this card, the main event, pretty much as always, which I'm going to be tackling. And then we've got Gamrot versus Klein, which Dom is going to be looking at, as well as Jafel Filho versus Allan Nascimento, which Josh is going to be looking at. So moving into the first one, the main event of the evening, we've got a 5-round flyweight bout between Erin Blanchfield and Maycee Barber. Obviously, this is a big clash of styles. You've got Erin Blanchfield, who is pretty much only really respected as a good grappling artist. I think her top control is very good for the women's division. She has a decent submission game as well when she feels comfortable and dominant on top. And to be fair, just in a fight where Erin Blanchfield is going to be having success grappling, I think she's very likely to have a shutout kind of performance. On the other hand, you've got Maycee Barber, who she's had a quite an interesting UFC career. She came in with a lot of hype, and I know that she was quite heavily quoted as saying that she wanted to break the record and be the youngest champion in the UFC, beating that John Jones record. But it didn't work out for her eventually. I think she got injured, didn't she, in that Roxanne Modafferi fight, and she lost as like a -800 favorite or something. But anyway, the two of them are both sitting around the top of the division. This is probably a title eliminator bout after Natalia Silva and Valentina Shevchenko get done with their business. But to me, I think the betting odds that are currently sitting around -250 for Erin Blanchfield, for me, I can't fault them. I think they are quite accurate, really. And whilst this is a clash of styles, I think a lot of the initial disrespect on the betting line, where Erin Blanchfield opened at around minus 160, minus 170, came from the fact that I think the stock is quite low on Erin Blanchfield at the moment, and I think it's kind of unfair that it's so low. So she was dominant in her UFC career until she came up against Manon Fiorot in her first main event. She showed very decent 5 rounds cardio, but she did show that if she can't get her takedown, she's less than half the fighter she is if she can. And we know Fiorot has very good takedown defense. And, you know, in hindsight, that fight was always going to be very difficult for Erin. Shout out to Dom for actually picking that. I think he told us last time we were on the podcast. Maycee Barber, on the other hand, she's just a striker through and through. She's got the rare power for women's divisions. She can crack. She will crack if she gets the opportunity. But I think there's a little bit of a physicality sort of overcompensation with Maycee Barber, in that I think that because she's quite stocky and she's quite enthusiastic and aggressive, she overwhelms a lot of opponents. And once those opponents realize that they have nothing to offer in return of firepower, you know, getting that respect back, as the commentators often say, I think a lot of them wilt, and they allow Maycee to tee off on her. I mean, from memory, a lot of her finishes are all sort of like standing TKOs against the fence, where it's not so much the power shining through, but it's more just the sheer volume and tenacity. But I do rate Erin Blanchfield quite highly as a gritty fighter. I think that when the going gets tough, Erin Blanchfield will still be there, and she will do what she can to find a way to win, to get herself out of those tricky positions. So I don't think that Erin Blanchfield is a strong contender to be a victim to Maycee Barber and her high volume blitzing, which then, you know, obviously turns us into having a potentially longer distance fight. And I think that that's where the difference is going to be. Obviously, Maycee Barber has, I don't think, ever fought 5 rounds before. And I think she's had a couple of interesting round 3s. Looking back on to the Andrea Lee fight, which is quite a key one in breaking this fight down, she leans towards her wrestling in the 3rd round, which is something she doesn't often do. I think that you could kind of see that while she was still showing that enthusiasm, there definitely were some sort of slight cardio concerns there, which I'm very interested to see what rounds 4 and 5 look like, despite not being super confident that she's going to gas out. But we also know that from seeing Erin Blanchfield's last fight, she really grows into a fight against Rose Namajunas. She was 2 rounds down in the first couple because she didn't really get her wrestling going. But once she felt more comfortable, and once she felt that Rose's initial, high level of endurance kind of slowed down a bit, she really took over and really implemented her game. And I think a key way she's going to implement her game is with those body lock takedowns that she's a big fan of. Maycee Barber, going back to that style of blitzing and being chaotic and rushing her opponents, she's off balance all the time. Barber's style is really going to get her caught out against a clinch-based grappler like Erin Blanchfield, somebody who wants to take her down in close, because Maycee Barber, for all her enthusiasm, she's going to push herself right into the pocket, find herself overextending on a shot that doesn't quite land. She's going to be off balance, and Erin Blanchfield is going to take that opportunity to take her down to the mat. It's exactly what Andrea Lee did. She landed, I think, 5 takedowns in total, and they came with such ease, and it wasn't really due to Andrea Lee really driving or having such genius timing. It was more the fact that if you were to freeze frame it at the exact moment that Lee initiated it, Barber is like doing yoga. Like she's so out of position because she's just thrown too much into the shot. And I think that that's something Erin Blanchfield really should exploit here. Whilst they are on the mat, I think it's not going to be super dominant, but it should be a calm amount of time for Erin Blanchfield. I don't think Maycee Barber's get-ups are super impressive, and I do think that Erin Blanchfield's top control is good enough to really keep that fight calm and stationary on the mat. So with that in mind, I think I see Erin Blanchfield winning the latter half of the fight. There might be a couple of sketchy moments in those first couple of rounds, but I do trust her to stay safe when she needs to, and I do trust Maycee Barber to shoot herself in the foot by overdoing it. So I can't see anything else than a favorite win here, really. So I saw Erin Blanchfield at minus 170 a couple of weeks ago, and I thought it was the it was one of those favorites that still had a little bit of meat on the bone, and I think the market has really sided with me on that. She could now be found at around -250, which I'm a lot less keen on. I think that's kind of the price that I was calculating it to be at the time when it closes. So I've got a little bit of value there on Erin Blanchfield at -170, but I'm not so sure it's the best bet in the world at this current price tag. But yeah, Erin Blanchfield is the pick for me. Does anyone else have any opinions?
Go ahead, Josh.
I agree with what you said, basically. Like, with Barber being very unbalanced when she strikes, to Blanchfield having that technical aspect of her wrestling and her hand speed and everything else, like, I see this being a bit one-sided. Although I do want to bring up one somewhat important thing here. You did say that Barber hasn't fought in a 5-round fight, which is true. But I feel like because she was sick in the past, I think she had a bout cancellation before this fight sometime. But ultimately, I feel like that might impact her ability to train properly for a 5-round fight. And I question as to whether or not she'll be looking good on the scales because of that change in camp. Because you're basically preparing for 2 fights, or not really 2 full fights, but 3 rounds plus 2 more. So I wonder if Barber is going to be healthy enough to maybe even take this fight. I'm not a doctor. I am far from that, but I just feel like that maybe behind the scenes, it's not going to be as smooth as some might think. But yeah, that's my only kind of comment here. What do you got, Dom?
Yeah, so I don't have anything really to add. I think that I agree with both of your assessments of this fight. I don't think Maycee Barber's ever missed weight, so I guess that will be interesting if you're saying she might have some troubles with the cut. I think the only thing for me to add is that I think what I learned from Erin Blanchfield's loss to Fiora is that obviously she has a lot of heart, because she didn't get the takedowns and she still stayed in the fight and tried her best to make it competitive on the feet, even though she was obviously outclassed on the feet and didn't have the power that Fiora had. But seeing that just was like one of the things that I hadn't really seen from her, because she has been so dominant, as you mentioned, Will. She's got those early round finishes against pretty decent competition. And I think the yardstick really for these 2 girls is they've both fought Miranda Maverick, who herself was considered a prospect in this division, and Maycee went to split with her, whereas Erin Blanchfield won a dominant decision, and they fought her in quick succession. That was a while ago, though, to be fair. But I think Maycee Barber's wins recently, even though she's on a win streak, they just haven't been very convincing. I think you already identified the Andrea Lee one as one that was particularly worrying. I actually bet on Andrea Lee in that fight, so I was a bit disappointed she lost the split. But I think I think Barber did enough. And I'm also got in early as you did. Well, I didn't think about it too much. I just pulled the trigger at about -180, and yeah, we'll see what happens. I think it could be pretty one-sided. The one question I have for you guys actually is, do you think that Erin Blanchfield can finish this fight? Because the girls that she hasn't finished, she's finishing everyone basically, like good fighters, and the ones she isn't finished are really top tier fighters. So is Maycee Barber good enough on the ground to survive for 5 rounds? Because that's the only angle which I'm wondering about, whether to take a fight goes long prop, or Erin inside the distance. What do you think?
I think it's less likely. So I would say under 50% of the time that she wins. Does she win inside the distance? But it's possible. I think a lot of it really comes from the fact that Maycee Barber hasn't actually spent too much time on bottom against a very good grappler. She did have some moments against Andrea Lee where Lee was able to, I think, move into mount, if memory serves. But positionally, those positions were sort of objectively more dangerous, but I don't think anything really came of them. But yeah, there's definitely like questions to be asked there. Again, 5-round fight, don't really know. And also, if you're saying that maybe she's not ready for a 5-round fight because of the recent fight cancellation, which is a good point, by the way, not something I thought about. Yeah, I mean, there's potential for a later one, I think. But my issue with Erin on the return there is watching that Rose Namajunas fight, when it was quite clear she was 2 rounds down. You would have thought you would have seen a lot more of an urgency in terms of fight finishing sort of potential from her in rounds 3, 4, and 5. Whereas when she got that top position, she was a lot more concerned about losing it. So it was a very sort of conservative and a very safe display. And I think I would lean towards us probably expecting to see that, especially considering Maycee Barber is going to be the better striker. I think once Erin gets her down, she probably thinks, don't fuck this up. This is a very important moment for me. I need to hold this for multiple minutes. So I don't think we would see a super aggressive Brazilian jiu-jitsu display from Erin, but that all depends on how much Maycee wilts or doesn't wilt in the later rounds.
Yeah, I reckon early on it's likely that Blanchfield could get a submission, especially if Barber doesn't really settle in properly. Like she's not like fully awake or not warmed up as some fighters might not be. I kind of look at it as like a sandwich, which sounds weird, and I'm by no means hungry right now, but I might be after this. Like the bread of the sandwich, right? You got the layers and all that crap. So the first 2 rounds is the first slice. The last 2 rounds is like the top slice. I reckon it's the submissions either going to be in the first 2 or the last 2 rounds, because in round 3 maybe it's going to be a bit too even in terms of cardio or like the slipperiness of the fighters and all that bunch of crap. So yeah, I reckon either the first 2 rounds or the last 2 rounds we'll see a submission from Blanchfield. Although it would not surprise me at all if there was a decision. I mean, that's always in the realm of possibilities, Yeah.
To twist your arm on it from a betting perspective, it looks like the fight goes the distance is going to be around -200, -225. So I don't really know if +200 for fight doesn't go the distance is appealing enough for me personally.
Yeah. I don't know. Whenever it comes to this kind of fight where a finish can only really happen one way, I always lean towards those combo round kind of finishes, combo round 1 or round 2 submission in this case, or round 4, round 5. But yeah, when you put it like that, those odds are pretty middle ground. Not middle ground, but like crap. I'll just leave it there. Crap. Not enticing at all.
Yeah, I haven't seen that prop. I thought it'd be much better than that, to be honest. I was hoping it'd be closer to evens on decision, but yeah, that doesn't really leave much to the imagination with those kind of odds. But I guess you're taking Blanchfield, right? So that's your pick, right?
That's the one. Yeah.
Shall we move on?
Sure thing.
Okay, this is my fight. This is Mateusz Gamrot taking on Ludovit Klein, Poland versus Slovakia. 2 guys which I have followed quite closely, more so Mateusz Gamrot because I have Polish family, so I like Polish fighters like Jan Błachowicz and Michał Oleksiejczuk, I think. Other than that, there's not too many Polish fighters that I follow, but Gamrot he's up there basically. And this was a hard fight to break down for me because Gamrot's been at the top of the lightweight division in the UFC basically since he beat Arman Tsarukyan. So he's 24-3 in his career, whereas Ludovit Klein is 23-4. So they have a similar number of fights, 23-4-1. And in the UFC, Gamrot is 7 wins, 3 losses. Ludovit Klein is 7 wins, 2 losses, and 1 draw. The draw was to the Black Country Banger, whose name I've forgotten, but Will I know is Jai Herbert. He drew to Jai Herbert in London. in a fight which he probably should have lost. I believe he was down on the judges' scorecards, and then he got either eye poked or he got fouled. I think it was a groin shot, and a point deducted from Herbert that led to a majority draw. So he's pretty much 7-3. So they've got the same UFC record, but they've fought very, very different levels of competition. Ludovit Klein's last fight was against Roosevelt Roberts, who is pretty much a journeyman at this point. Unfortunately for him, he's not a great fighter. And Ludovit Klein, I think, was a -800 favorite going to that fight, and he lost the first round. He won unanimously 29-28, but he didn't look like a -1000 favorite when I rewatched that. Anyway, this is the tail of the tape right here. This is the key stats. There's not big disparities in height and reach. It says 5'7", 5'10", but I think these guys are going to look pretty similar in height. And Ludovit Klein's going to be a bit shorter, a bit stockier, and the reach is slightly in favor of Ludovit Klein. But this was such a close fight for me to think through. I had to build another slide, which is here. This is the pros and cons slide for the two fighters. So let's start with Gamrot on the left. So in his favor, he's got a very strong strength of schedule. So as I said, he fought Arman Sarukian, and then after he fought Arman Sarukian, he took on, let me have a look, Benny Dariush. He lost to Benny Dariush. I bet on Dariush in that fight, and that was just a grappling match. He got out-grappled by Benny. Benny was able to stave off his takedowns, his relentless takedowns, and just keep the fight standing. And Gamrot's not so comfortable if you keep the fight standing, as evidenced by all his fights against stand-up fighters where he usually gets in some sort of trouble. He fought Jalen Turner, and he got knocked down. I think it was in the first round. It was wobbly, and then does what he tends to do in every fight, which is recover and win the fight by decision. That was a split decision win to Gamrot. Then he fought Fiziev, who got injured. So we don't need to talk about that because it was an unfortunate injury pretty early in the second round. He got knocked down by Rafa dos Anjos in his penultimate fight, and did what he does, which is recover, rally, and won that fight and in a unanimous decision win before his last fight against Dan Hooker, in which he looked pretty terrible. Did his normal thing of getting knocked down. It wasn't recorded on UFC stats, and then rallying, making it a very exciting fight, but ultimately losing a split decision to Dan Hooker. That fight was in Australia. It was UFC 305, Du Plessis versus Adesanya. So the only thing, I guess, asterisk on that fight, it was definitely a long way. If anyone's been to Australia, as I have, it's a very, very long way to go, and it can sometimes mess with your body clock. So yeah, what's there to like about Gamrot? It's basically he's pretty unique in the sense he's just relentless with pace and cardio. He just goes for takedowns. He just sticks to you like glue. He's chain wrestling. He's obviously got good takedown defense. He trains in Coconut Creek in Florida, an American top team. And as evidenced by the fact that he keeps getting knocked down, but winning, he's obviously very dogged. So he's got the dog in him, as we like to say. And on the converse side, the negatives for Gamrot is chin. I mean, it says here he's been dropped in 4 of his last 6. That doesn't count the basic knockdown that he got knocked down by Dan Hooker. So it's really basically every fight he's getting knocked down. He's not, I wouldn't say he's past his prime. I've heard this narrative that he's on the decline. I can't really buy into that. He's 34 and a half. I put the half there to try and, gauge how close he was to 35. I think until you're 35, you've still got it. I know he's had a long career, but Ludovit Klein's had a similar length of career, even though he's younger. The striking is, it's okay. It's effective. So I'm not sure that I should have put it here in the negatives, because I think he does keep people at bay. I think he kept Arman Sarukian at bay with his striking. He definitely hit Hooker a few times and made him think about the power that he wields. He doesn't throw enough. So I think that sometimes he's just so obsessed with chain wrestling and just getting to positions that he doesn't always look to damage his opponents as much as he could. I think that's a very limited criticism. I think he's won enough fights using his chain wrestling that it's not, obviously the judges feel he's doing enough. So that's a weak one. And then if we look at the right-hand side and Ludovit Klein, he is on a tear, basically. He's on a 6-fight win streak. He's primarily a striker, although he has utilized wrestling. Like I mentioned in the Roosevelt Roberts fight, he was getting outlanded on the feet. Roosevelt Roberts was winning the stand-up. He landed a head kick on Ludovit in round 1, and so Ludovit showed pretty good fight IQ and took Roosevelt Roberts down in rounds 2 and 3 and won that way. He's but when he's on the feet, he's got powerful kicks, nasty leg kicks, nasty body kicks, and high kicks. He's rarely been taken down in the UFC, but he's not fought anyone who has any takedown pedigree unless you count Thiago Moises, and I've lost all faith in Thiago Moises now. So I watched that fight, and Thiago Moises wasn't chain wrestling. He was basically quite tentative on the feet and shot because he just didn't want to stand up fight with Ludovit Klein. So Ludovit Klein's not really faced anyone that you can in his whole career who's got the kind of abilities to grapple that the Gamrot has. The age factor is good on the Klein side. He's only 30, so he's making improvements, but he's fighting out of Slovakia, so I'm not sure how good those improvements will be. I don't know what the quality of competition or like training partner is like in Slovakia, but I can't imagine it's anywhere near as good as American top team. And I know that he's definitely been in Slovakia because I checked his Instagram before I came on, and 1 week, yesterday he arrived in Las Vegas, so he's 1 week out from the fight. He's just landed. He definitely fought a lot weaker competition than Gamrot. There's no footage of Klein defending takedowns against high-level grapplers. So he was taken down once by Nate Landwehr and once by Jai Herbert, and that was a sweep. So he's only suffered 2 takedowns, and they're both basically from strikers. Sometimes he seems a bit low output, a bit sort of low urgency. He's very a calculated striker, so he's not like coming at you full steam and throwing like mad, which I think is a style which Gamrot wouldn't like. He takes his time on the feet. He likes to settle into his strikes. And the lack of heart thing, this is a bit of a harsh one really, but it's just basically I watched the fight with Nate Landwehr, and he kind of just seemed to give up. He got the anaconda choke was attempted earlier, so he knew it was coming, and then the second time it happened, obviously he'd taken some damage and he took a beating on the feet from Nate Landwehr, but he just didn't look like he was really in that fight. Of course, this was at featherweight, so he moved up in weight, and he's never been defeated at lightweight. So his 2 losses on his UFC record, if you don't include the draw, the Jai Herbert draw, that was at lightweight. He's only lost at featherweight. So it's a really, really difficult fight to call. In the end, despite the fact this is going to look really scary for Gamrot because he's probably going to get knocked down, I decided to go with Gamrot, but I was flip-flopping on this all week. I had it as Ludovit Klein, and just before I came on, I decided to... Perhaps I was influenced by the line movement. It was quite a big line movement in favour of Gamrot because he opened about -130, he's now -160, and Klein opened at +120 and he's now +140. That probably did it for me. I was right. Someone knows something. He's definitely a big step up in competition for Klein, and I think Gamrot's going to do what he always does. Like, he's going to do it. You just can't stop it. Even if you hit him, he's probably going to recover, get to your ankles, single leg you, run the pipe, and just be all over you and just wear you out. And I just think that kind of fight doesn't serve Klein well. He wants to be at range. I think he's very heavily muscled. I think he's gonna get worn out by Gamrot. So either he finishes this fight in rounds 1 or 2, or Gamrot is going to just wear him out completely and drown him, basically. That's what I think is going to happen. I landed that conclusion about half an hour ago, thinking about this fight for over a week. So with that rather lengthy breakdown, I'm going to ask Will and Josh what their opinions are. Guys, what do you think? Help me out here.
Yeah, this is a real headache of a fight. Seeing that you whipped out the pros and cons list, I was not surprised, because this one is it's a headache, to say the least. I think that for me, it's just there's 2 massive, like, either red flags or just gaps on either one for each fighter that just for me makes this like an impossible one to really be confident in. And I think on the Gamrot side, it's just the fact that he has, on paper, possibly the worst style for MMA in 2025. He is somebody who is, very grapple reliant, but does nothing in terms of like damage or fight ending intent. And we saw that in the Dan Hooker fight, where there may have been a predominant sort of positional superiority from Gamrot, but Dan Hooker did much more with it, much more with the time that he had inside the cage in terms of trying to end the fight and doing damage. And that's why Gamrot lost and wasn't favored on the judges' scorecards, which I understand. And I think, there's a big conversation about damage and fight-ending intent versus control in MMA at the moment. And the judges do seem to have, for the most part, really actually like aligned and galvanized around the criteria on that one. Which, you know, am I giving credit to judges in 2025? Maybe. But on the Klein side, you've just got such a gap in knowledge in terms of his level of competition. Because had Mateusz Gamrot looked dominant and won that Dan Hooker fight unanimously, there's arguments to be made that he's now in the title picture. And how do you go from being like very close to being in the title picture to suddenly fighting a guy whose last win is a 29-28 over Roosevelt Roberts? Like there's a stark contrast there. And as you say, there's no footage of Klein defending takedowns against this high level of grappler. So yeah, honestly, I'm completely at a loss here, because one half of me thinks, like, you know, given what we saw in the Dan Hooker fight, and also some of the statistics on Klein's side, this actually could be a great opportunity to just rinse and repeat the same fade on Mateusz Gamrot, because if Dan Hooker can do it, I think Klein probably can do it as well. But on the other half, what I just said about the level in competition, comparing a possible title contender with someone who's just fought Roosevelt Roberts, getting the, what is it, like minus 160, minus 170 price tag on Mateusz Gamrot feels insane. So I feel like hindsight is going to be a wonderful thing, and that, you know, when the fight is said and done, somebody's betting line is probably going to look like a really juicy price, but we don't know which one, which is why it's so close. But yeah, it's from a pick prediction, I think it's an absolute nightmare. I don't blame you for choosing Gamrot, but if that tick was on the opposite side and it was on Ludovit Klein, I wouldn't blame you either. So yeah, this one's just really difficult.
Yeah, when it comes to Gamrot, I've always had a high focus on his wrestling. I mean, he has an extensive background in ADCC competitions, NAGA competitions, which is the North American Grappling Association. Basically, ever since his fight against Sarukian, in which it looked like two ferrets were fighting, you know how ferrets scramble everywhere, they look like really long slinkies just going at it. I have been a fan of Gamrot since then, and I feel like, as much as his style can be a bit boring, like as Will said, there's no real finish potential on the ground, there's no damage being done. I do think that because this is at the apex, that he will be able to shut down the mobility of Klein a lot easier than a full-sized octagon. But then again, because of his one-dimensional style of just going for the takedown and all that stuff, it's probably going to be easy for Klein to just negate that by not being there. So I expect a lot of lateral movement from Klein and Gamrot just pressuring. So I reckon there's not going to be a lot of action. I reckon there's going to be just mostly movement. Like it's going to be like a sprint, like a race around the edges of the octagon, really. And in any case, if that does happen, Gamrot probably wins by being the one that's looking to do most of the action, right? So, as Will said, and as Dom said, what a headache! What a headache of a fight. And while I do agree with the Gamrot pick, I am ultimately pretty 50-50. You know, I'm very, very split down the middle.
Yeah, that's where I've been all week. So yeah, I hear you there. And like I said, I've been moving that tick back and forth. So this was a pick, not a bet, and we'll get to bets later, because I think there are ways you could potentially attack this from a betting angle, but not. I decided that from the money line perspective, because ultimately I felt that, you know, I felt the Jose Aldo and the Zahabi fight was pretty close, and that, but I decided to pick Zahabi because I felt the money line offered the value. I don't know if there's value on Klein even at plus 140, although it's definitely going that direction. I was thinking, what price would I need on Klein to take it? And ultimately, what made me feel this way was I thought I'd probably see like plus 180, to be honest, or plus 200. He's plus 140 right now. So I personally am not going to play this from a money line perspective, but because I've done so much analysis on this fight, I do think there are ways you could attack this from a betting angle through props. I just, like you said, I just don't see how Gamrot can necessarily finish this fight. like Ludovit Klein is no slouch on the ground from what I've seen. So I don't think he's gonna necessarily get subbed. Obviously, there's a lot of finishing upside on the Klein side if he catches Gamrot. So yeah, there are ways that we could attack this from a betting perspective, but definitely money lines. I'm going to steer clear. And with that, I will hand over to you, Josh, for the final breakdown.
All right. What's more exciting than two grapplers grappling, huh? I'll try and make it mildly interesting. Too much failure, probably, but we'll see. So Nascimento is the first guy I want to cover here, mostly because we've seen more of him in action in the UFC. He is coming back from 2 years of inactivity due to some pullouts, some medical injuries, illnesses, whatever. But I do think that if he does compete, and he should compete this week, we're in for a good show. We're in for a great grappling bout between two fantastic submission specialists. When it comes to Nascimento's takedown defense, which is a bit of a talking point in my circle, at least, people are worrying about his 16% takedown defense, and I'm just perplexed as to why they're worrying about that. Because when you watch how he got taken down by Tagir Ulanbekov, he was very, very active in using that Kimura sweep to snatch the arm and just reverse position. And I feel like no matter what Filho is going to do, Nascimento is going to be maybe a step ahead and reverse anyway and get into a more advantageous position. When it comes to his groundwork, he's like a blanket. He drapes himself over his opponent. He locks down their position. He ensures that he beats them to the position, basically. I was going to say beats them to the punch, but this is not going to be a striking match. But if it was, I do believe that Nascimento does have a hand speed advantage. He has shown excellent short combinations in the pocket. But when it comes to power, I feel like it wouldn't take much for Filho to, knock Nascimento off balance. What I expect in the first round is that Nascimento opens up with leg kicks, and he does have a very sharp leg kicks, but so does Filho. It's a very confusing kind of stand-up bout, and as most grappling bouts are, it always comes down to the most tiniest of advantages on the feet, and because Nascimento has a slight edge in reach and a slight leg reach, apparently, I don't know how that works, but I reckon that Nascimento is going to be a bit more technical on the feet. And I mean, we've seen Filho struggle against oh god, what's his name? Daniel Barros, I believe, the Spanish guy. He got rattled badly multiple times, and he still came back to win, which was amazing. But still, getting rattled that many times is not good news for any stand-up action, really. But for Filho, I don't have much to say about him, only because the way that he's finished fights is stupendously quickly. And I hate seeing that when it comes to grappling. Like, I know that being dominant in this sport is amazing and one of the greatest talking points that you can say about a fighter. But when it comes to grappling, I prefer to see a long battle, like a proper chess match, so I can see how they maneuver through the guard position, side control, all that shit. And that's not what we see from Filho, because he's submitted, Ode Osborne in the first round, and then Daniel Barros after his face got battered, I just don't think that from a grappling standpoint that he as in Filho, cannot match the tenacity, the ballsiness of Nascimento, because Nascimento, when he fought Tagir Ulanbekov, he was always looking for submissions. He was always looking for sweeps. He was always looking for ways to get into a better position. Whereas Filho is more straightforward with his finishes. He quickly got into those submission positions and then pretty much submitted his opponents. So I got Nascimento to win this one based purely off of seeing more of Nascimento which sounds a bit weird, but I don't particularly like grappling. It gives me a headache to try and break it down, even when I write about it, because to break down a grappling match, it takes like a year for me at least. So my official pick here would be Nascimento. Probably by points. I don't see a submission happening here, because obviously Filho does have that grappling ability too, but I do expect positional advantages to be on Nascimento's side. So yeah, my pick would be Nascimento.
I like it. I thought it'd be interesting to note that these two were scheduled to fight previously, August the 10th, 2024. The fight was cancelled. I don't know which fighter pulled out, but when that fight was originally scheduled, Nascimento was a minus 225 favorite, whereas this time round it's like the books forgot and they opened him as a minus 120 favorite. But money's been coming in steadily on Nascimento. He's now minus 170, as it says on screen. So yeah, thanks for the breakdown, Josh. I don't have a lot to add myself, because I've, to be honest, not watched these fighters fight many times. I don't have many UFC fights. They've only had 3 each. I know that Nascimento's been in the UFC longer, and like you said, Filho's had some quick finishes. But yeah, I haven't got a strong recollection of either. But now you're mentioning the Tagir Ulanbekov fight, I do remember that was a close one, and Nascimento impressed me in that fight. Will, what's your take on this one?
Yeah, I think Josh has definitely highlighted the very key points that stood out to me when I looked into this one. Initially, seeing it was two Brazilians who are known almost entirely for their grappling, I thought it would be the kind of fight that I'd pass on. But obviously, because I know Josh picked it for this podcast, I did take a look at it, and I'm glad I did. Because it should be a fun fight. It's one of those tricky ones where there's the cliche in MMA that when you have two dedicated grapplers, you end up getting a striking fight, which I feel like every time I've ever paid attention to that, that's always been true. So for some reason, I took that to be fact. So I started by looking at like the striking of both of them, and I think that it's not going to be pretty on either side, but I do think Nascimento looks better there. He's got more volume. He just looks more well seasoned as a striker. He seems to know what he's doing a lot more. He throws combinations together, whereas Filho's very sort of one and done. He's got that kind of throw one big power punch to crash the pocket, kind of like Benoit Saint Denis does. It's not really sort of process driven. It's just kind of chaotic. I think if they spent a lot of time on the feet, Nascimento would probably pull ahead by just looking more dominant, and utilizing a jab would be enough. So hopefully he does that. And again, the other thing that Josh mentioned, which I think is right on the money, is the way they behave when they're both on bottom. Allan Nascimento managed to win 2 rounds on. Actually, I'm not too sure about that. He impressed us against Ulanbekov, and I think won a round or 2 across all of the scorecards, mostly by being on bottom, just by being active. He was throwing elbows, he was throwing up submissions very constantly, as Josh said. Whereas I could see quite a few instances on tape when Filho was on bottom, he was a lot less active. He was happy to accept the position, which is a criticism that has kind of stuck with him. I think I heard that a couple of times on commentary when doing tape. So thinking about this from a fight that goes a longer distance, which I expected to do, as Josh does too, I think you've got a fighter who should be winning the minutes on the feet in Allan Nascimento. He will have to worry about Filho's power, but I'm not too sure how confident you can really be in that. And then also when they're on the mat, I think Allan Nascimento will be very active on bottom, but also more dominant on top due to Filho's passiveness on bottom himself. So overall, I think you've just got a fight in which Allan Nascimento should come out of it winning more minutes than he loses. And again, Filho winning on the feet via a power method and him knocking out Nascimento is probably one of the more likely outcomes here, I think, because like I say, he's he's at a disadvantage minute by minute. And, you know, when you get to high level submission guys like this, it's very, very unlikely that you find one guy finishing the other. So, yeah, Allan Nascimento was the side for me. I came away feeling that he should have been a more sizable favorite than he was. So really interesting tidbit there, Dom, that you've sort of just picked up on the fly, which is great, on that being the case when they fought originally in 2024. I was aware they were originally booked, but I didn't think to look at the betting odds. Minus 225 is very interesting, considering the only thing either guy has done since is Jafel Filho has beaten Amir Albazi in a grappling competition, which I don't really think tells us too much. So very interesting to see the difference in opinion there for very little reason. And I think that just kind of goes to show how funny and subjective MMA betting can be from like a sports trading perspective. You've got so many different opinions that you could literally look at the same fight a year apart and have a different conclusion on how dominant somebody should be. But I think that overall the conclusion on both attempts is that Nascimento should be the favorite, and I agree with that. So he's the side.
Great. With that, we can look at our bets for this week.
All righty. So for me, I have 3 bets on this card, which we lead into quite nicely from the fights that we've broken down. Obviously, starting with Erin Blanchfield. As I said, when I started looking at these fights a week before fight week, as I always do, Blanchfield was around minus 170, which I just didn't think was steep enough. She's now at like minus 250, which I think is right about where it should be. So I took the opportunity to get involved there. So I put 2.7 units on Erin Blanchfield's money line at minus 170, alongside a parlay with Blanchfield and Rayan dos Santos, who was around minus 300. I think she still is, but she was around the time I bet that. It's not a high level fight at all, but I personally just can't ignore the fact that I think she could be value at minus 300. Alice Ardelean is atrocious. It is not UFC caliber, whereas Rayan dos Santos, despite the fact that she's 0-2, I think she is UFC caliber. She should be 2-0. She got robbed on 2 decisions, which, there's no smoke without fire. So I understand that causes hesitance, no matter which way you look at it. But I think she should finally be able to get a win here. And I think if Ardelean looks exactly the same as she has done in her previous UFC fights, I think every woman on the UFC roster should be able to beat her. So minus 300 is a fine parlay piece. The reason for the very strange stake quantities there, because Dos Santos is a bit of a shakier pick, if Erin Blanchfield wins and Dos Santos loses, I will have a slight amount of profit off of those 2 bets. I thought I'd frame it that way because I'm obviously much more confident in Blanchfield than I am Dos Santos. And finally, Allan Nascimento. As I said, I do all my work a week in advance. When I looked into this fight, because Josh said he was going to break it down on this podcast, the line was a lot closer. Nascimento was around minus 125, which I just simply didn't think was big enough. I had him around minus 150, minus 175. So I saw value there for the reasons that we've all talked about in the podcast. I think those are 3 really good positions to be in. Obviously, the line's moved on 2 of them quite heavily, so I'm not sure I could necessarily recommend betting them now. But I quite like that slate. I'm quietly confident going into this weekend.
Yeah, from my side, I'm in a similar vein in terms of backing Erin Blanchfield, and I have 2 units on her at minus 180, and I've also parlayed her with Kong Wang, who fights the following week, I believe, and that's even money, just 1 unit on that. And the other bets are just ones that I'm considering, and we already discussed whether the Blanchfield fight will go long or not. So I'm just wondering if the round 4 5 decision would be plus money. Sounds like it's not, so forget that one. Klein decision no action, I think, would be an interesting hedge if you decide to take Gamrot money line. I was thinking maybe Gamrot by decision. I don't really see that he has any other path to victory, so could play both of those in effect. Klein decision no action if it is a good if it's a good odds on that, which it probably won't be, to be honest. And then I was interested in Medeiros as a underdog. I don't know. I haven't watched a lot of footage for that fight. I need to do more tape. I may not end up betting it. And then, I always put split decision, don't I, for all my fights, because I get so in the weeds with these close fights that I'm like, oh, this could be a split. But to be fair, they both have split decisions on their records. So Gamrot has a couple of split decisions, and Klein has a split decision on his record, and a majority decision, which wouldn't count. But I thought, if it was long enough, that this might be a good long shot sprinkle. And that's it from me.
Well, as I said in my breakdown, I got Nascimento winning the fight, so I'm going to stick by that via a bet here. As for the two-legger, I always try and look at inside the distance as a leg, because there's always I guess better odds. Like maybe not, maybe I don't know, but it intrigues me. So I parlayed that with Blanchfield moneyline, and as you guys know, I say it every week. Me and Will post our stuff every week at the MMA betting subreddit. Mine's posted on Wednesday. I don't know if Will's is out yet, but maybe in a couple of days. Will, you want to confirm that?
Yeah, looking at either a Sunday or a Monday release for me, which is usually how I do things.
Yeah, cool. So pretty much you'll see all my picks there, all my official bets there as well. I wish I could do more here on the podcast, but I don't really think that far ahead. Like typically when it comes to my write-up, I start it tomorrow. So I'm doing like an early homework here. So, as the last point says, more to come on Wednesday. And yeah, it'll be there. Trust me.
Great. And now we're going to try something different on the podcast. Like true degenerates that we are, we're going to bet live on the podcast. We're going to do this $100 challenge, which basically means try and turn $100 into $1,000 over as many weeks as it takes. Once we hit 1,000, we can decide what to do with the money. That's the positive scenario that we're hoping for. As you saw on the previous screen, we all had Erin Blanchfield as a pick, and so I think it's definitely pertinent that we have her as one of our picks and bets for this week. So we've got $100 on Erin, and Will and Josh both dug into the Nascimento Filho fight, and they felt that was Nascimento was the value there. I don't have much to add. I am supportive, and so we're going to put half a unit or $50 on Nascimento, and we'll see how that works out on the next podcast.
All right. So with that brings us to the end of episode 5 of the Lord Ninja Choke podcast. Thank you all for tuning in and listening. If you are on YouTube, we would really appreciate comments and a subscription if you aren't already subscribed. And we will also have this up on Spotify quite soon. So if you're listening there, please give us a follow as well. And I believe you can also comment as well. Any engagement would be great. So thank you very much for listening, and we will see you for next week's card.